lanterns in space capsules. If we could have powered space capsules with kerosene lanterns, NASA would never have developed solar panels. We wouldn't have them, and it wouldn't be an option. That was a dedicated market for a technology that could produce electricity from the sun. India did the same thing with LEDs. You created a government purchase program which was going to purchase LEDs. If the various public sector enterprises that bought those early LEDs could have bought incandescent lights, they could have. And globally, nobody would be able to afford LEDs. India drove this revolution for LEDs. India is now driving this revolution for various solar and wind technologies. And what happens when you drive this? Well, you drive through it, and all of a sudden you're over here. You're in the early majority. You've got a nice, fat customer base. And when you have a nice, fat customer base, go up the S-curve, and you bring down, guess what happens? Here it is. This is solar. The blue is the sales. Yellow is the cost. Sales, as you go out and the sales go up, the cost comes down, and you have a revolution. So that's what we need to do. We need to move people through that innovation phase quickly by creating dedicated markets. Governments can do that. Industries can do that. Sometimes it just happens in the case of, well, frankly, in the case of cell phones, it was a market failure. Governments all over the world were unable to build wires. People couldn't get landlines. I mean, my wife is from Bombay. She and her mother like to talk about how absolutely special it was that way back in the 1930s, somebody in the family had gotten a landline, and that was a really amazing thing. Now, that was a huge market failure. Inability to provide telephone lines was an enormous market failure, but that market failure led to the cell phone revolution. Now I want to talk about India's role. I still do come here, but I, for many years, would come to India to talk about climate. And what I would hear from the top leaders of your government was basically the following narrative. Look, we know climate is a big problem. We know we're going to take the hit. We're going to be hurt badly. We're an agricultural society. We've got a lot of marginal lands. We are going to suffer a lot. But look, in the global energy economy, India doesn't really matter. You can't do anything about it. You Americans can. We think you should. Apparently, you're not going to, which was fair commentary. But we can't do anything. Well, that, my friends, is no longer true. India matters. There's one thing you take away from today, it's India matters. Today, you lead the world in population. I know it's not official, but I know what happens with your census, and I know what happens with the Chinese census. You are the largest country in the world today. By 2027, and today, you have the cheapest renewable power in the world. Your auctions regularly come in with the lowest cost wind and solar in the world. So you are now the leading producer of the world's most important energy source. By 2027, you will have the world's largest labor force. You will pass the Chinese. You will have more than 1 billion workers. And by 2030, you'll have 25% of the world's entire workforce. In 2027, you become the major driver of oil demand. You are the single market that will most influence the global price of oil because you are the market that will have the greatest swing up and down. You won't be the largest oil market. The Chinese will still be larger, but you will be the price maker. You will be determining the price of oil. And by 2040, you will actually be driving the entire global energy economy. You will be the largest single force in the global energy economy. Because India is the place that is going to change and grow the fastest. And it is that delta which is going to drive global markets. So how you choose to meet your increased demand for petroleum, your increased demand for energy, is going to shape how the world confronts the climate crisis. I'm going backwards. That's not helpful. Wait. Okay. India is different. You have the lowest investment of any major country in high carbon development. Cars, skyscrapers, electricity, per capita, you got less of that than anybody else right now. You don't have to replace very much because you start out without very much. You have little oil or natural gas, so you don't have a very powerful oil lobby to say, no, we got to burn a lot of oil. You get your oil from overseas. Most of your urban growth lies ahead. Most of your cities have not yet been built or even laid out. You have the most digital intensive economy in the world. Per dollar of output, more of that output comes from digital products in India than anywhere else in the world. You have a very small per capita carbon footprint. That means you have the ability to jump over what everybody else did wrong and do it differently. You have a lot at stake. Let's begin with health. This is a map that was released last week by the University of Chicago. It shows how many years of the average person's life is sacrificed to PM 2.5 pollution. This dark red up here is regions of India where the average person's life is shortened by more than 7 years by pollution. And the red and the orange are 3 and 5 years, and then down here in the south, it's only about 2.5 years. But you are uniquely at risk, and this is all combustion. But I want to be clear, this is not all industrial combustion. It's not all the pollution of development. A lot of it is the pollution of stalled development. It's biomass cooking, it's field burning, it's 15th century brick kiln technology. So India has a huge development opportunity here, which will also greatly improve both the quality of people's lives, and by the way, it'll be very helpful for the climate. Second, your economy is at risk here. After Turkey, India is the most vulnerable country on earth to the price of oil, because you have an economy that is very distribution intensive because you're a big country. You have to move stuff long distances, and that takes fuel, and you don't have very much fuel. So when the price of oil goes up, the Turkish lira goes down faster than the rupee, and the rupee goes down faster than anything else. So economically, if you electrified India's transportation by 2035, you would add 5% to your GDP by that one step. Finally, climate. Because of the fact that you have so much at stake, and because of the fact that you have so little to undo, you actually are positioned to be the world leader in solving the climate problem. Okay. Mobility is a unique opportunity for India. You had a big summit here 2 months ago called India Move. If you look at the utility sector, I don't know when India will get off coal, but I know with great certainty how India will get off coal. The pathway is clear. Oil is now the biggest climate threat. India is the least invested in oil, and it is the biggest driver. The Indian government has signaled its direction. The government said at the LIFT summit it wants to leverage your existing assets. It doesn't necessarily want to go down the pathway of personally owned enormously land and resource wasteful transportation. It said it wants to electrify, and this company has been a leader in India in that space. And you want to focus on public transportation services, buses, taxis, ride-hailing, three-wheelers. India, as the Prime Minister said at the MOVE Summit, should lead the mobility revolution for all the reasons we've been discussing. Now we get to the interesting part. If India wants to lead the mobility revolution, there are a whole bunch of questions that haven't been answered and that people like the folks at Mahindra need to be thinking about. One thing to say, we want to focus on public transportation. That makes sense. You've already said you're going to do rail first. Indian railroads will be the first all-electric segment of India's transportation sector. But after that, do you focus on trucks or buses? How do you get it two and three-wheelers? How do you incent taxis and ride-hailing to buy what's currently a higher-cost product? Well, you're going to use some incentives. I was at NITI Aayog. I don't think I'm sharing any state secrets by saying that the government of India would like to accelerate electrification, and it wants to do so with carrots, not sticks. That's the way the government of India usually operates. But what kind of incentives? You could have operating subsidies. The public sector can purchase electric vehicles. It's doing a little bit of that. In the past, you've often had capital subsidies. Those are frequently not too efficient. You can impose mandates, but on whom? You can deregulate. There's already some of that happening, saying you don't have to get a license or a permit to do certain kinds of electrified activities. And how much does the electricity cost? That's going to make a difference. Finally, there's some big technological questions. Is the future of electrification recharging? Or is the future of electrification battery swapping? India is probably going to decide that. I don't think India knows which way it's going to go. I hear people talking in both directions. But I think you're probably going to be the ones who make the global decision. What kind of battery technologies? How long do we hold on to lead? Do we just go to lithium, or do we do something with nickel or something else? I'm not an engineer. How do we integrate it with the Indian grid? Is it actually feasible to use electric vehicles as storage for the grid? Or do we actually use battery swapping stations as storage for the grid? There are a lot of very interesting questions that this company will be heavily